Okay, folks, we are starting another Alaska Airmen's Association Advocacy update, and just logged on here. I'm going to give people a few minutes to get joined up, so we will wait just a minute to get people a chance to get on their phones and find out what's happening this evening here for the Alaska Airmen's Association Advocacy update. So it looks like we've got about 5 people on Instagram and 12 people or so on Facebook. So that's great to see folks joining in. And we'll again give folks a little bit of time, but want to just go through a list of the things that I'm planning on covering tonight. I'm going to talk about private airports in the state of Alaska and a little bit of information about those and what's happening right now. Going to talk about landing on roadways in Alaska. There's been a lot of chatter on some social media places, so I want to kind of give our position on that and some of the research that I've done through the years on that subject. And then going to talk about the long-range discrimination radar proposal that is coming up from the Missile Defense Agency. But before I get to all those things, just want a brief introduction. My name's Adam White. I do government and legislative affairs for the Alaska Airmen's Association. Been doing this for a little more than a decade now, part-time, and coming to you live from Nenana, Alaska this evening, and here in the hangar. Some of the other things I'm involved with, I do a lot of work here in the hangar in Nenana. Again, airplanes behind me. No better place to do paperwork than in a hangar where you can dream about pushing the airplane out and going flying. Yes, I am wearing another Hawaiian shirt tonight. I'm still trying to keep a bright attitude, and just this whole COVID pandemic and all the health mandates and all those things, life is not back to normal. And so looks like Sam is asking if I'm muted, and I don't think that I am, but if anybody else on Facebook is having problems with the audio, let me know. Looks like Sam's having trouble hearing me here. David, if you can hear me, if you can say something just so that Sam knows that it may be a problem on his end. So I'm not hearing anybody else or seeing anybody else talking about connection problems there with the audio. Anyway, yeah, so back to wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Thanks, Ted, for letting me know that. Good to hear the sound check is working good. Sam, may be a problem on your end, so not sure what's happening there. Good to hear folks on Instagram can hear me as well. So anyway, all that distraction to say, yes, I am wearing a Hawaiian shirt again. Folks have started giving me a little bit of just friendly prodding and poking a little bit of fun. So I don't know, we may keep wearing Hawaiian shirts as we do this from time to time, but I will tell you, I don't have a very extensive collection of Hawaiian shirts. So maybe have to add to that collection. So anyway, but to the business at hand tonight. So it looks like we got a few folks that have joined us here. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. First thing I wanna talk about is private airports here in Alaska. Just some high-level stuff about that. I give you a little bit of the reason why I'm going to talk about that tonight. The FAA periodically goes through the list of private airports, and just like we have to do now with aircraft registration, we have to notify the FAA if we move, change of address, those kinds of things. There is a database of private airstrips, and the FAA, trying to be good stewards of that data and that information, goes through and just verifies that contact information, verifies the information about the airport, see if there's any things that need to be updated and changed for that master record. What's happening is the FAA is finding that they are having a hard time getting in touch with a lot of people when it comes to private airports. So if you are the registered owner or manager of a private airport, and you haven't heard anything from the FAA in a while, or if you've moved and you haven't updated your contact information, please do so. And let me tell you why that's important. Because if the FAA cannot get in touch with you, if the FAA cannot verify that information after a series of attempts and a procedure, your airport is taken off the database. It's taken off the record. If it's charted, it will no longer be charted. Lots of things that happen because of not being in that database anymore. So we don't want to lose those private airports. So please make sure your contact information is correct and current with the FAA. If you don't know how to do that, I encourage you to reach out to me. My address, email address, and contact information is on the Alaska Airmen's website. And you can direct message me through social media here, through the Alaska Airmen's pages, and I will help you get that information so you can make sure that's up to date. There's 114 or so on that list for Alaska right now. Now, we have a lot of private airports in the state. Some of them are not registered, some of them are, but we've got 114 of them that the FAA is having a little trouble getting in touch with the registered owners. So please update your contact information if you have a private airstrip. Now, a lot of people, there's a big discussion, a big debate going back and forth. It has been for years. Should you register your private airstrip? Should you not? What kind of liability exposure do you have? You want to have an airstrip in your backyard, but you don't want anybody to know about it. All those things. Well, it's kind of hard to not have your neighbors know about it if you're using it, because you tend to make a little bit of noise. So having your airport registered may help with that. When your neighbor sells their property, it's full disclosure to be able to tell that new owner that there is an airport in the vicinity. If it's a public use private airport, there could be some airspace protection that comes along with registering your airport. If there's some kind of new instrument approach or another airport coming in, or if there's airspace changes, the FAA will go to bat for you to some extent if it's a public use private airport. So there's private use private airports, public use private airports, public use public airports, a lot of different classifications, and we don't have the ability to get too deep into that tonight as to those differences and the benefits and the problems that go back and forth with the differences of registering your airport. But the liability issue is always a big one, that people are concerned about the liability they may be exposing themselves to with having a private airport or private landing strip. Thankfully, Alaska was rather proactive in some of this. Alaska Statute 09.65.093 is where you can find some information about civil liability relating to aircraft runways, airfields, and landing areas. And so just a brief reading of some of this stuff for us tonight, just to kind of give you some idea of what's happening. A person who is the owner or operator of an aircraft runway, airfield, or landing area is not civilly liable, except for an act of omission that constitutes gross negligence or recklessness or intentional misconduct for the injury to or the death of a person or for damage to an aircraft resulting from the use or attempted use of the runway, airfield, and it goes on this whole long list of stuff. So that's the gist, and there's a lot more to it. I mean, I can show you some more information about that if you get in touch with me. But the good news is if you have a private airstrip, you are protected from a lot of liability because of this Alaska statute. That's good news. You probably have noticed that a lot of private airstrips are marked on the charts. It's always nice to know where there's a suitable landing area if you're out there flying around. Some of them are private use, though, and you need to get permission before you use them. But as just about any situation, if it's an emergency, better to ask forgiveness than permission, right? So be able to get in and get down and have access to that landing site. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about there on private airports and the need to keep your contact information current. It's very important that you do that with the FAA so that that database can be kept current. And the Airport Facilities Directory, the Salmon Book, the Alaska Supplement, if your information is listed there, need to be able to keep that current for you. So I'm going to talk now about the long-range discrimination radar and the proposed expansion of Restricted Area 2206. And if you're not familiar with all of that, if you fly in the interior of Alaska, if you fly up the Parks Highway through Windy Pass into interior Alaska, R2206 is that small restricted area over the Clear radar station in Clear and Anderson, Alaska, just north of Healy. And right now, that restricted area goes up to about 8,000 feet, 8,800 feet, and it's not that big. So not been a problem to get around it through the many, many years that it's been there. There is a proposal to expand that airspace, and the reason why is because they're building a new radar, a very, very, very powerful radar. It is a long-range discrimination radar, LRDR. You know, everything has acronyms in the military and in aviation, but the LRDR, long-range discrimination radar, is an early warning system for intercontinental ballistic missiles. And they are looking to the southwest and then looking back to the northwest towards Europe and towards Asia. Now, this radar, like I said, is very powerful and potentially hazardous to electronics in your aircraft. And so because of that, the FAA has standards and distances that you have to be away from certain levels of radio energy. And so they are having to expand that restricted area. Now, we are in the middle of a comment period right now until June 2nd for the environmental assessment. And it's this big book right here that I'm still reading through and marking up to make sure that the Alaska Airmen's Association is commenting on how it's going to affect you, our membership. I will tell you that there is a pretty complicated pie chart, which I realize now this is in mirror form, so it doesn't do you much good to look at it online here tonight. But I will, at the end of this, post an address for you to go and take a look and see some of the charts and graphs and the explanation of what's going on with that airspace. But essentially, from 400 foot above the surface up to, and of course this particular sheet doesn't tell it to me, I want to say flight level 330 from memory. So very tall, again, basically from 400 foot above the ground level up to flight level 330 and extending out a pretty good distance, protecting the airspace around that radar. Technically, the reason why it's there is not to protect the radar, is to protect you from flying, and actually more specifically to protect your aircraft from flying too close to that radio energy. Some concerns that I have, full disclosure, I live about 20 miles north of this radar. I fly in this area a lot. My concern, not just as personally as a resident and a citizen of this part of the state, but as a government affairs advocate for the Alaska Airmen's Association, my concern is the shape and the size of this new restricted area and its proximity to Windy Pass. Windy Pass is the one of the most used VFR routes to transverse the Alaska Range, one of the lowest routes to be able to get through the Alaska Range, and this has the potential for being a roadblock, a plug, as you might say, in the end of the pass. I will say that the Missile Defense Agency and the FAA have worked really, really hard to some of our input and your input to get that as small as we can possibly get it to not be as much of a hindrance. But it is still something that we're going to have to avoid. The other concern I have is that its proximity to the Clear airport. Again, if you've flown in this area, you know that that airport is a great place to stop if the weather is not good in the pass. You can stay outside of the pass where the weather is usually good and wait out the weather. It's a good alternate for windy conditions here in the interior and weather conditions. I've used that airport personally numerous times and had to sit there for a while to wait to be able to come home to my airport here in Nenana. It's going to be a change in the way we do business, that's for sure. One of the things that we're going to work with coming up here in a few months is they have to test this radar and basically do a proof of performance of the new radar system, and that means turning it on before the FAA is going to be ready to chart the new airspace that they are proposing. Again, we are in the middle of a comment period right now to where we can still have some input into the shape and the size of that restricted area expansion. My best guess estimate is that by October, they're going to need to start turning on that radar and testing it. Now, in order to do that, they're going to have to start using temporary flight restrictions because they're not going to have this process complete to be able to have it charted permanently. So look for some temporary flight restrictions to come online in the October timeframe and then extend for up to a year and a half before they can get that information charted for us. So it's going to be a little complicated to learn and to figure out some of these areas down to 400 foot. Another slice of the cake is at 1,500 foot AGL, and actually flight level 320. I was mistaken. It's only to flight level 320 instead of flight level 330. We do have a way to get through this area following the Parks Highway. So we did ask, and they've worked hard to give us access to fly that ground referenced highway. Still pretty low. They only give us 1,000 feet in that northeastern corner of that airspace. I'm going to ask for more. I don't really think 1,000 foot is enough in marginal weather, and if we have a lot of traffic, to be able to get some separation between everybody. Don't know if we're going to get it, but if we don't ask, we certainly won't get it, that's for sure. So if you want to know more information about that, I'll be glad to, again, I'll post an address where you can go and download this big document. It's a PDF, and there's a lot of information in here. Some of it may be of interest to you. I will post the Alaska Airmen's position statement and letter, public comment letter that we'll be submitting. Again, the deadline is June 2nd. My goal is to have our letter up on our website for you to be able to look at within the next 10 days. So you can have some time to formulate your own response and be able to voice your opinion. But that way you can also know what we're doing for you as members of the association. So before I get to the next topic and the last topic for us this evening, I want to briefly talk about membership and why that's important. From the obvious standpoint that your membership helps fund the activities of the organization, and one of those activities is my part-time job. Now, I'm not sitting here begging for a paycheck, but I will tell you that if membership numbers are in decline, it does affect the budget and my ability to advocate for the needs of the membership, and not just me personally, but this position is hard to do. And so your membership is important for that respect. But I will tell you that it's nice when I go to meetings, when I attend, actually most of it now is teleconference and via Zoom and GoToMeeting and Skype and all these other platforms that you would use off and on, but now you use on a daily basis. When I attend those and be able to introduce myself if folks don't know who I am on the call or in the meeting, and explain a little bit about the Airmen's Association. And when I say we have 2,000 members, which yesterday, I think the official count was 2,008. But when I say that we have over 2,000 members, it gives me a little bit more credibility. And it helps when I give our position and we explain why this is important to our membership. It's not just one or two people we're talking about. It's an important thing to have strength in numbers. And your voice added to the 2,000 others is important. So if you're not a member of the Airmen's Association, I would encourage you to look on our website and become a member. If you are a member, thank you. I appreciate that. I will say that my membership dues, I more than make that back in some of the discounts that you get when you buy fuel or some other businesses across the state of Alaska. I have more than a couple of times already this year saved more than the membership cost to be a member at those locations. So I'm going to get off the soapbox about membership, but if you're not a member, please consider joining the Airmen's Association. There's some good resources available behind the membership login on our website that you can only access by your membership credentials. And for you folks out there that have been members for many, many years, thank you so much. And several of you are even lifetime members, and that's a huge commitment and investment, and I want to say thank you for that. The last thing I want to mention tonight is landing on roadways in Alaska. If you are active on social media and follow some of the groups that pertain to flying in and around Alaska, you probably have seen some of these threads that have popped up. A lot of good conversations back and forth, and very little trolling that happens. Typically, social media tends to have trolls that pop up out of some place and try to stir the pot a little bit. Thankfully, a lot of these groups and pages on social media pertaining to flying in Alaska doesn't have a lot of that activity, so that's good. But the question was recently asked, can we land on roadways? Is that legal in Alaska? And the short answer is maybe. So that's really no answer at all, and I apologize for that. But I will tell you that this question comes up to me probably twice, 3 times a year. Some years more often than that. People wanting to know, hey, a buddy of mine talks about going out someplace and landing on a road and taxiing up to a lodge someplace, buys gas, gets a hamburger, flies home. Other folks saying, yep, land out on this place, and then we go hiking up into the mountains and come back and use the roadway as the airport, as a runway. And years ago, it was specifically mentioned in Alaska statute that it was permissible to do that. I can't find that anywhere anymore. A lot of the people I've asked can't find that statute anymore. And based off of the activity that's happened on a very active thread on Facebook here in the past week, nobody else can find that statute anymore either. I've even tried to go back and figure out where it went and what happened to it, and I haven't been able to find any conclusive evidence as to the story as to what happened to that statute. So there's nothing that specifically permits it. That being said, there is nothing really that strictly and specifically prohibits it either. There is an Alaska statute, 02.30.030, concerning reckless operation. And it basically says that a person may not operate an aircraft in the air or on the ground or water in a careless or reckless manner so as to endanger the life or property of another. And it kind of explains a little bit more about all that. Then Section B talks about a person may not operate under the influence of intoxicating liquor or controlled substance, which is not what we're talking about. So that's included with all that under reckless operations. So that's the only thing that we can find, and I say we, the collective we, not just myself, but other people that I've reached out to that are in the same line of work, and other people that have piped up on social media. That's pretty much the only thing where we can find that it says that it might be a problem. Now, we all know that who determines what's reckless? That's kind of like the whole deal that the FAA might use, that you are acting in a reckless manner. If they were going to violate you on something else, that's kind of like when you get a ticket from the state trooper for driving and you have an accident. Well, you were driving too fast for conditions. Well, okay, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. It's kind of hard to prove one way or the other. But if you had an accident, yeah, you were driving too fast. So this whole reckless operation statute is up for a lot of interpretation. It's very ambiguous as to some of those things. Now, it's obvious if it's gross recklessness, that's pretty easy to determine. There has been a couple of instances here lately where folks have been spoken to by the Alaska State Troopers and asking them, what are you doing? You can't do this. You shouldn't do this. So that's where this has come up more recently is, can we, should we, and I've been saying this an awful lot here lately with the health mandates, just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. Again, nothing specifically making it illegal, but nothing specifically saying that it is legal. So use your best judgment. Obviously, we don't want to cause injury or endanger the life of property of another person. You don't want to wreck your airplane. Watch out for power lines, signs, all those types of things. And so be careful where you do that. Some places, you know, I've heard from a lot of former state troopers and even current state troopers, wildlife troopers especially, is like, oh yeah, we land on the roads all the time. What are you talking about? Well, show me, where's your authorization to do that? Where does it say it's okay to do that? And so then that whole conversation that we've just had happens over and over again. So again, the short answer is maybe. So be careful. The last thing we want to do, and listen carefully to this, the last thing we want to do is have someone landing on a roadway that causes a problem, either one, by their attitude when they deal with law enforcement. Never a good idea to have a bad attitude when you're dealing with a state trooper. I know a lot of state troopers. They're good folks. And if you cop an attitude with them, you're going to have problems. So don't have a bad attitude about it. Listen to what they have to say, work through the issues, and see if you can come to an understanding. If we have a bad accident and somebody gets hurt, or God forbid somebody gets killed by landing on a road, whether it's in the airplane or in a vehicle, we may lose the opportunity and it becomes strictly prohibited and specifically mentioned as a prohibited activity. We have to be careful. I'm also a little cautious, and to be honest with you, I had a little personal dilemma to even talk about this tonight on social media. And here's why. Should we let sleeping dogs lie? By the fact that we talk about it in public, in the open, on social media, is that going to wake somebody up to, hey, yeah, we shouldn't allow that to happen, and we're going to put a stop to it? That's not what we're looking to do. That's not what we want to do. You know, I used the analogy with a good friend today. Part of me feels like we're climbing into a bear den and poking a hibernating bear. And I know that that usually doesn't end well. So we have to be careful. With all of these things, again, be respectful, not just to those around you, but to law enforcement if you are confronted about what your activity is doing and why. Obviously, please don't take this as saying that you should not land on a road, and if you have an emergency situation and you're flying over a remote stretch of the limited road system we have in Alaska, and you choose not to land on the road because you don't want to have to deal with, was it legal or was it not? Please don't let that influence taking a bad situation and potentially making it worse. If you've got a straight stretch of road where there's no power lines around and you can't see any signs, why would you not land on the road? There is a lot of cases of folks that have landed on the road, not just here in Alaska, in an emergency situation, and it helped have a great outcome, all that. So just looking at some of the comments that are popping up here and there, and you're right, respect law enforcement. Respect is a big deal. We all appreciate having a respectful, non-dynamic, and calm conversation about issues. So that's my advice. And it's not legal advice, of course, but be careful what you're doing. Make sure that you're not doing something that's going to endanger someone else or yourself. And besides, do you really want to damage your airplane? So be careful. So with all that, I'll kind of open it up for questions to see if anybody has anything that I didn't cover or want me to expound on anything that I have said tonight. We'll give folks an opportunity here for a few seconds to see if anything pops up. It is nice to see some friendly faces, or actually names that pop up, and some of you that I know, some of you I've heard of, others that are unfamiliar, but thanks for tuning in. And again, I'm doing these a little more frequently now, so it would be good to have some input from a lot of you as to whether or not you want me to keep doing it at this frequency. Right now, it's about every other week. Early on, it was just once a month. We've had a lot of things changing, of course, in our world, a lot of information that needed to get out to you, and this is a really good way to do that, we're finding, and so trying to do this a little more frequently. So Not seeing any questions or comments popping up right now that I could address, but it is good to, again, see folks interacting here. And of course, in a day or so, we'll have a copy of this posted on our YouTube channel, where you can go back and watch all the previous updates and be able to get that information there as well. Want to encourage folks to reach out to me. My email address, adam.white@alaskaairmen.org, and it's also listed on the alaskaairmen.org website. You can call me. I'm pretty sure my number is listed there. If it's not, it's in the transponder for sure, and I'll take those phone calls and emails and want to work through and help you find some answers. Social media is also a good way to send me a message through the Airmen's social media and be able to work with you there. Again, I will post the link to the LRDR environmental assessment, long-range discrimination radar environmental assessment, that we have a comment period that we're in right now through June 2nd. So with that, I will just make sure that I'm not missing any questions here as I scroll back through. Not seeing anything that I'm going to miss here. So with that, I will sign off and say goodnight, and I'm going to go home and get some supper. So we'll see you next time.